The man in the white jacket walked the length of my post 3 times before he decided I was worth ruining his afternoon over. And I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of it. I had already counted him. I counted everyone. That is the first thing they teach you that nobody outside the wall ever believes. They think the stillness is empty, that a man who stands at the south gate of Harrowgate Palace for 2 hours without moving his eyes has gone somewhere behind his own face, a kind of waking sleep with a bearskin on top of it. It is the opposite. The stillness is the most awake a person can be. I had counted the schoolchildren in their gray coats by the railing, and the woman selling paper flags from a cart that needed a new axle, and the 2 plainclothes men from our own service pretending to be bored tourists near the lamp standard, and the pickpocket working the edge of the crowd whom I had already flagged with a glance to the man at the lamp standard. And I had counted the man in the white jacket from the moment he came off the avenue with that particular walk. You learn the walk. It is not a swagger exactly. A swagger is loud and a little frightened underneath, a boy's noise. This was quieter and worse. It was the walk of a man who has been the most dangerous person in every room he has entered for 15 years and has stopped checking whether it is still true. The shoulders rolled a fraction too much. The hands hung open and a little away from the body, ready, the way hands hang when a man has spent 10,000 hours teaching them to be ready and can no longer make them stop. He wore a white training jacket with a wide black collar, cut to be seen, and on the left breast there was an embroidered emblem, a clenched fist inside a laurel gold thread on black, and a row of small enamel pins above it that I did not need to read to understand. A man who wears his trophies into the street is telling you he has run out of rooms that already know. His name, I would learn within the hour because he made very sure everyone learned it, was Cassian Vane. He fought under the banner of a gymnasium 2 cities away that called itself the Iron Laurel, and he was, by his own first sentence to the crowd, the realm's 3-time open champion, full contact, no points, no padding. He said it to the schoolchildren. He said it the way other men say good morning. I stood at the south gate in the red tunic and the white gloves with the chinstrap, biting the same groove it had bitten into me for 11 years. And I did not look at him, because looking at a man like Cassian Vane is the first gift you can give him, and I had decided some years ago to stop giving gifts I would only have to take back. He stopped in front of me at the regulation distance, and then slowly took 1 step inside it. "You're very good," he announced to me, but pitched for the railing for the phones that were already coming up like the heads of small bright animals. Genuinely, the discipline, I respect discipline, I built my whole life on it. He tilted his head. "But here's my professional opinion, friend, and I give professional opinions for a living. You're not a soldier, you're furniture. You're a very expensive piece of furniture in a hat." A laugh went along the railing, not unkind, the loose, easy laugh of people who are relieved that the dangerous-looking man has turned out to be funny instead. I have heard that laugh more times than I can number. It does not touch me. The chin strap, the weight of the bearskin, the rifle held at the order against my right side, the particular ache in the arch of my left foot that always wakes at the 90-minute mark, these touch me. The laugh is weather. "Look at him," Cassian Vane said, walking a slow half-circle, careful to stay in frame for the phones, a showman who knew his lights. "He won't even blink. You think that's strength? I'll tell you what that is. That's a man who's never been hit, a man who's never been tested." He turned the word over like a coin he was proud of. "I've been hit 10,000 times. I've had my nose broken on 3 continents. That's why I can stand still when it counts, and you can only stand still when it's safe." He spread his arms to the crowd, generous, the host of a party I had not been invited to. Stillness behind a railing is a costume. I'm offering this gentleman a chance to find out if there's a fighter under the fur or just the fur. I want to be precise about what I felt, because the easy thing, the thing the crowd assumed, the thing Cassian Vane was counting on, is that I felt nothing, that the training had hollowed me out into the furniture he described. That is not true, and it never has been. What I felt was a very old, very quiet thing turning over in the cellar of me, the way a dog you raised from a pup lifts its head at a sound the visitors can't hear. I knew that sound. I had spent the better part of my younger life making that sound and answering it. And I had spent the 11 years since teaching myself, every single day in the cold and the heat and the rain that gets in under the collar, that the strongest thing a man who knows how to hurt people can do is decide, again, not to. He did not know any of that. He saw the fur. "I'll make it sporting," Cash and Vane called out, and now he was grinning, the grin of a man who has found a way to be the center of the afternoon. "I'm not a bully. I don't hit furniture. I'm issuing a challenge." He said it to the cameras. An open challenge in front of all these good people witnessed. The Southgate guard versus me, anywhere he likes, anytime he likes. Padded, gloved, refereed, I'll make it fair. I'll tie one hand behind my back, I'll let him pick the rules. He let it land. Or, and this is the part I think we all already know, he stands there in his pretty coat and proves my whole point for me. Furniture doesn't fight back. Furniture just gets dusted. The phones drank it. I could feel the shape of the thing he was building because I had seen its smaller cousins 100 times and because I am not, whatever he believed, a stupid man. It was no longer about me. By tonight it would be a clip with a title on it. By tomorrow it would be a name, his name, climbing on the back of a uniform that could not, by every rule that held my world together, answer back. He was not challenging a man. He was challenging an institution that had bound its own hands on purpose, and he had correctly judged that bound hands are the easiest in the world to be brave in front of. I looked at the cobblestones 11 inches in front of my boots, where I had been looking, and I did not move, and somewhere behind my still face the old dog in the cellar stood all the way up. I knew how this ended. That was the trouble. I knew exactly, precisely, to the half-second, how this ended if I let it off the chain, and I knew that the knowing was the one thing in the world I could not show him. So I gave him the gift of nothing, and I kept counting. My name is Corwin Brennick. The men I serve with call me Sergeant, and the men I served with before that, the ones who are still alive, called me other things in other places, and most of those names are not the kind you say in front of schoolchildren. I am 51 years old. I have stood at the south gate of Harrowgate Palace, in the kingdom of Eldermore, in the service of the royal house of Harrowgate, for 11 years, which is to say since the season I came home and could not, for a long while, sleep in a bed with my back to a window. The post fixed that. People imagine the still standing is a punishment, a thing you endure. For some of us it was a medicine. There is a particular peace in being permitted, by order, to do nothing but watch and hold, after a life spent doing the other thing. Before the gate there was a regiment whose name I will not write down even now, and before the regiment there was a school, of a kind, in a country with a great deal of sand in it, where a quiet instructor with gray in his beard took a furious young Eldermorian and spent 4 years teaching him that the most important muscle in the body is the one that says wait. I learned to break a man's balance before he knew his weight had shifted. I learned to take a knife off a hand that thought it owned the room. And I learned, last and longest and hardest, the thing that the instructor said was the only lesson that mattered, that a man who must win is already losing, and a man who does not need to win cannot be beaten. I did not understand it for years. I understand it now. It is the single reason I was able to stand at that gate with Cash and Vane 4 feet away calling me furniture, and not give him the one thing his entire performance was designed to extract. He wanted a flinch, any flinch, a flush at the collar, a tightening at the jaw, a flick of the eyes to his face. One frame. The whole architecture of the challenge rested on getting one frame of the statue cracking, because a crack is a clip and a clip is a career, and a man who could humiliate the king's own guard on the cobbles of the south gate would never again have to introduce himself in a room. I gave him nothing, not because there was nothing in me, because there was too much. The relief came at the top of the hour, as it always does, and I have never in 11 years been so aware of the 4 minutes of changing of the post. My replacement was Tomas Farrow, a serious young man of 26 who had been at the gate 2 years and still ironed his collar twice. He marched up in slow time, halted, and we performed the small wordless choreography that hands a post from one man to another, the present, the turn, the count, while Cash and Vane narrated the whole thing to the cameras like a man at the races. "Oh, look, reinforcements," he said. "They're swapping out the furniture. Careful, lads, don't scratch it." Tomas's jaw moved. I saw it the way I see everything. A young man's anger is honest and useless, and I willed mine into his stillness the way you steady a green horse without touching the reins. "Hold," I thought at him, "hold. You do not feed it, you have no idea yet what feeding it costs." He held. Good lad. I marched off the post in slow time, around the inner rail, through the wicket, and the moment the palace wall took me out of the sightline of the phones, I let out a breath I had been spending an hour not taking. My hands were perfectly steady. They are always perfectly steady. That is its own kind of warning sign, the steadiness, and I have learned to read it. The steadier my hands, the louder the dog. Color Sergeant Halloran was waiting in the guardroom with 2 mugs of tea, and an expression I had seen exactly twice before in 9 years of serving under him, and both of those times had ended with a man being quietly removed from the regiment. He is 60, Halloran, with a face like a closed ledger, and he had been at the window. "You saw," I said. "The whole building saw." He pushed a mug across the scarred table. "It's already up, 40,000 views before you came off the post. The caption says, 'Champion humiliates Royal Robot, full challenge inside.'" He said the words the way a man reads out a charge sheet. "There's a clip of him circling you. There's a freeze frame of your face with a red ring drawn round it that says, 'Not even human.' And there is, Brennick, a great deal of comment, most of it from people who have never stood still for anything in their lives, about whether the King's Guard is a pack of cowards hiding behind a no-touching rule." I drank the tea. It was too hot and I was glad of it. Let them comment. That's the regimental line, and it's a good one, and I've signed off on it for 30 years. Halloran turned his own mug a quarter turn on the table, a tell I knew. "But there's a wrinkle, and the wrinkle is why I'm in here with the tea and not out there writing it up." He looked at me with the closed ledger face. "His people have applied formally, in writing, an hour ago, for a permit to hold an exhibition of martial skill on the public forecourt outside the South Gate, 3 days from now. They've CC'd the press office, the city, and 2 members of the royal household by name. It's a stunt, and we all know it's a stunt, and the request is going to be refused, and the refusal is going to be the next clip. Palace too scared to let the champion on the grass." He set the mug down. "He's built a box. Whatever the institution does, he wins the next round of it. That is a man who has done this before." "He has," I said. "You don't get that good at building the box by accident." Halloran studied me. "You know him." No, and that was true, and also it was the smallest possible amount of true. "I know the type, I've fought the type." I had said more than I meant to, the dog talking through me. He heard it. Of course he heard it. He is Halloran. He did not ask the obvious question, because the obvious question is the kind of question you do not ask a man in this regiment, and because he had read my file, the real one, not the recruiting one, when I came to the gate 11 years ago, and he was one of perhaps 4 people in the kingdom who had. He just looked at me for a long moment over the tea, and then he said the thing that turned the whole afternoon, the thing that took it off the cobbles and put it into me where it stayed for 3 days like a stone in a boot. "Don't," he said quietly. "Whatever it is you're not saying, whatever you're already half deciding in there. Don't, the line is the line, we don't answer it. We stand, we say nothing, and the thing burns itself out because they always do." He stood and gathered the mugs, and at the door he stopped with his back to me, and he said the rest of it lower. "I've watched it eat better men than you, the not answering. I watched it eat me. So I'm telling you as your friend and not your color sergeant, the day this stops costing you something is the day you've lost the thing worth keeping. Make sure it keeps costing you." And keep your hands where I can see them." He went out. I sat alone in the guardroom with the tea going cold and the dog awake, and a clip of my own ringed face already loose in the world. And I understood, with the particular clarity that has saved my life more than once, that this was not going to burn itself out. I found out how right I was that same evening, and I found it out from young Tomas Farrow, which is the part of the whole affair I have never quite forgiven Cash in vain for. Not the furniture, not the banner, not even the child's face turned into ammunition, but what the man Circus did to a serious 26-year-old who ironed his collar twice and had done nothing in his life but try to be good at a hard and thankless thing. Tomas was in the kit room after the evening stand-down, supposed to be cleaning his rifle, and he was cleaning it, but he was also, I saw from the doorway before he saw me, sitting very still with the phone face up on the bench beside him and his jaw working in that honest, useless way, scrolling. I have a rule about the young one's phones, which is that I do not lecture, because a lecture is a gift to the thing in the phone, the same way a flinch is a gift to a man like Vane. So I came in and sat down across the bench and started in on my own kit, and I let the silence do the asking. "They followed me home," he said at last, not loudly. "Two of them, the big one with the shaved head and another, nothing happened. They just walked behind me from the relief all the way to the tram, filming, asking was I the coward from the video, was I going to come to the forecourt Saturday and watch my sergeant get dusted, did the king know his guards were a pack of girls in fur hats?" He set the cleaning rod down very precisely. I didn't answer. I held the line. "You taught me that the first week. Eyes forward, say nothing, give them nothing." He looked up and there was a thing in his face I knew far too well, the first crack in a young man's faith in the rules that hold him. "But here's what I can't, Sergeant, here's what's eating me." I held the line and it felt exactly like being a coward, from the inside. It felt identical. And if I can't tell the difference from the inside, how is anybody watching the video supposed to tell it from the outside? How does anyone know we're not just scared? There it was, the whole of Vane's real weapon, said plainer by a frightened honest boy than the entire briefing room would manage the next afternoon. He had not even known he was holding the master key. The silence and the fear wear the same coat. From inside the coat on a bad night, scrolling, even the man wearing it can lose the thread of which one it is. I did not give him the lecture. I gave him the only true thing I had, which was small and which I have thought about many times since. "When I was about your age," I said, working the cloth down the barrel, not looking at him, because some things are easier said sideways, "I knew a man who could have walked away from any fight in the world and everyone would have known it wasn't fear, because his reputation walked into the room a full minute before he did. He never had to prove anything because everyone already knew, and I used to envy him that, the not having to prove." I set the rifle across my knees. It took me 20 years to understand he had the easy version. Anybody can hold the line when the whole room already knows you could break it. The hard version, the only one that's actually worth anything, is holding it when they think you're holding it because you're weak. When the holding looks exactly like the cowardice, the way you said, that's not the booby prize, Tomas. That's the whole prize. That's the only place the discipline is real, because it's the only place it costs you something. A brave man who gets credit for it isn't being tested. You and me this week, nobody's giving us credit. That's how I know it's real. He was quiet a while. Then he said, "Does it ever stop feeling like cowardice from the inside?" "No," I said, because he had earned the truth and a lie would have been worse than useless. "It doesn't. You just stop needing it to. Keep cleaning your rifle, iron your collar, stand your post, and don't follow them onto their ground, not the tram, not the comments, not the forecourt as anything but a guard. They want you on their ground because on their ground the only move is the one that loses. Stay on ours." He nodded slowly, and he picked the rod back up, and after a moment he turned the phone face down on the bench without my having said a word about it, which was the only victory available to either of us that night, and I took it. But I walked back to my room knowing that there were at least two of them now, Tomas, and whoever the unnamed younger guards were that Halloran would mention the next day, and that for every one I could sit across a bench from, there were 100 I couldn't, all of them watching the same coat and unable to tell which lining it had. The thing was no longer about my pride. It had not been about my pride since the cobbles, if I am honest. It was about a lie that looked exactly like the truth, and the only way I knew to kill a lie that wears the truth's coat was to make the truth do something the lie could not, in front of everyone, undeniably. And I did not yet know what that something was. Cassian Vane had picked the wrong statue. He just didn't know it yet, and the entire trick of the next 3 days, the only victory that would actually be a victory, was going to be making sure he never found out the easy way. The clip did what Halloran said it would do, the way water does what gravity says it will do. By the next morning it was no longer one clip, it was a season of them. There was the original, the circling, the furniture line, the red ring round my face. There was a breakdown by a man in a different gymnasium who paused the footage on the lines of my jaw and explained to 200,000 people that I was visibly terrified. Look at the micro-tension, which was so completely wrong that it would have made the gray-bearded instructor laugh until he coughed. There was a poll. There was a song, somehow, by the afternoon, a 30-second thing with a thumping beat and the furniture line sampled over and over. Just the fur, just the fur, just the fur. A kingdom that had walked past the south gate for 200 years without once wondering what was inside the bearskin now had an opinion about my courage. And the opinion was loud, and it was largely unkind. And it was, I will be honest with you because there is no point telling this story if I am not honest, the thing that came closest in 11 years to taking the post away from me as a medicine and turning it back into a wound. I went back on the gate that afternoon at the South Post because that is where the roster put me, and I do not ask the roster to protect me. The crowd had tripled. Most of them were ordinary tourists, the schoolchildren again, the flag seller with her bad axle, but threaded through the ordinary now were the others, the ones who had come because of the clip, holding phones up before they had even chosen an angle, hungry for the second installment. And among them, at 2:20, came Cassian Vane, and this time he had brought an audience of his own. 4 young men in matching black and gold iron laurel jackets, his students, arranged behind him like a sentence he had written in advance. "There he is," Vane said warmly, as if to an old friend. He had learned my name overnight. They always learn your name overnight, and he used it like a man handling a tool he intended to keep. "Sergeant Brennick, they told me your name." "I looked you up," he smiled. "There's nothing, did you know that? 11 years a gate guard, and before that nothing, no fights, no record, no rank that means anything, a blank." He spread his hands to his students, to the cameras. "I thought maybe I'd been unfair. I thought, what if this quiet man is some hidden master, like in the stories, and I've insulted a great warrior? So I did my homework, and there's nothing there to insult. You really are just the coat." I have a confession to make about that moment, and I make it because the whole point of the medicine is that you do not pretend the wound isn't there. He had, without knowing it, walked straight up to the one true thing and mistaken it for an empty room. There is nothing in the public record because the record I served in does not keep a public record. The blank he had found was not the absence of a man. It was the shape of one, cut out of the paper and filed somewhere with no name on the folder. He thought the blank was my smallness. The blank was the size of me. And the temptation, the precise, surgical temptation that Halloran had seen coming across the guardroom table, was to let one flicker of that knowledge reach my eyes. Just to watch the homework collapse, just to give the dog 1 inch of the leash. I gave him nothing. The flag seller, I noticed, had stopped selling flags and was watching me, not him. "All right," said Cassian Vane, and the warmth dropped out of his voice by a degree, the first real crack in his own performance, because a showman needs a response and a statue starves him. "All right, let's raise the stakes since the gentleman likes silence." He turned to his 4 students and clapped once, and the largest of them, a slab of a young man with a shaved head and a nervous, eager face, stepped forward and unrolled a banner between 2 poles. It was professionally made. They had ordered it, which meant they had planned this exact beat before they ever left the gymnasium, and on it, in gold letters a foot high, it read, "The Iron Laurel challenges the King's Guard. Cowardice is a choice." And under that, smaller, "Exhibition, South Forecourt, Saturday noon." "We're holding it whether they grant the permit or not," Vane announced, climbing onto the low stone ledge of the planter so the cameras could have him full length. "Public ground. Free realm. Saturday at noon I will stand on that forecourt, and I will issue this challenge one more time, and if no guard accepts it, then every person watching will know, for certain, that the famous discipline of the King's Guard is a fancy word for men who are afraid to be hit." He pointed at me, and the 4 students pointed too, a trained chorus. "Saturday, noon, be a man or be the furniture. Your king is watching, your country is watching, I'm watching," he grinned. "And honestly, friend, I hope you don't show. The empty chair is the best clip of all." He hopped down. He'd gotten what he came for, not a flinch from me, but a banner, a date, and a trap with no exits. They filmed the banner for 10 minutes. Then they rolled it up, and Cassian Vane and his 4 students walked off down the avenue with that same quiet, awful walk, multiplied now by 5, and the crowd surged and chattered and re-aimed its phones, and I stood at the south gate and watched the corner he had disappeared around for longer than a guard should watch anything, until the young man relieving me, Tomas again, marched up and I handed off the post and went inside to learn that the color sergeant had been right about every single thing, and that the easy version of this was now officially impossible. The meeting was in the briefing room off the inner court, and it had more rank in it than I had seen gathered in one place since my last life. Halloran was there, and the captain of the gate, a careful man named Drummond who chose his words the way a watchmaker chooses springs, and a woman from the royal household press office named Mrs. Carrow who arrived with a tablet and a headache, and sitting quietly at the end of the table in a plain dark coat, having said nothing and missed nothing. A man I knew only as Mr. Voss, who held no title anyone would say aloud, and whose presence meant that the matter had climbed higher than a permit. Mrs. Carrow spoke first because the bleeding was hers to stop. The permits refused, as of an hour ago. City Grounds office on our recommendation, citing crowd safety, which is true and which will be reported as cowardice within the hour because he's already drafted that post. We've seen the draft. His people are sloppy with their private channel. She turned the tablet face down, a small surrender. I'll be blunt with the room. We cannot win the clip. There is no statement, no refusal, no clever line that survives contact with a 30-second video of a champion calling a silent man furniture. The format is built to make us lose. The only question on the table is how much we lose and for how long. Then we lose for a week and it dies, said Captain Drummond. These things die. We hold the line. The guard does not engage. The guard never engages. That is the entire point of the guard. We refuse the permit. We double the public order present Saturday. And on Sunday the realm finds something else to be loud about. The man wants a fight. We deny him the only thing that makes him exist, which is a response. It was the right answer. I want to be clear about that, sitting here now with all of it long behind me. Drummond's answer was the correct one, the disciplined one, the one the whole edifice of my world was built to give. And I watched it fail in real time in that room before anyone laid a hand on me, because of a thing none of them at the table could see and I could not stop seeing. There's a complication, said Halloran, and he did not look at me, which is how I knew it was going to be about me or near me. It's not only the sergeant anymore. Young Farrows had his own clip now, the relief this afternoon, Vane's line about reinforcements, the boy's 26. He reads the comments, they all read the comments, we can tell them not to until we're hoarse. This morning 2 of the younger guards asked me privately whether the regiment was going to let them get away with it. Not the public, our own. The thing Vane is actually corroding isn't our reputation out there. He tapped the table once. It's the belief in here. He's teaching a generation of our own young men that the discipline is a leash and not a strength, and that, gentlemen, does not die on Sunday. The room was quiet. Mr. Voss at the end of the table turned his pen over once and set it down, and that was all. I thought about Tomas Farrow ironing his collar twice. I thought about the two younger guards Halloran would not name. I thought about the thing the gray-bearded instructor had drilled into a furious boy a long time and a long way away. A man who must win is already losing. And how I had built an entire second life on the back of that sentence. 11 years of it, standing at a gate proving every single day that the strongest thing is to not. And I understood in that briefing room that Cash and Vane had found the one attack that the knot could not answer. Because if we only ever stood, only ever stayed silent, only ever let it burn out, then to a watching 26-year-old the silence and the fear looked exactly the same. They are not the same. They are opposites. But they wear the same coat, and from the outside, to a boy reading the comments at midnight, you cannot tell them apart. The discipline that protected the institution was, this once, the very thing endangering it. With respect, I said, and the whole table turned, because the sergeant at these meetings is furniture too in his way, and the furniture had spoken. Captain Drummond is right that we cannot win the clip. We will never win the clip, so I'd ask the room to stop trying to win the clip. I kept my hands flat on the table where Halloran could see them, and to start thinking about what we can actually win, which is the boy, Farrow, the young ones. The thing Vane's poisoning isn't out there. It's in our own ranks. The color sergeant's right. So the answer can't be a thing we do for the cameras. It has to be a thing that's true whether anyone films it or not. Meaning what? Said Drummond, not unkindly. I don't know yet, I said, which was true and the truest thing said in that room all afternoon. But I'd ask for one thing. I'd ask that whatever we decide, the decision is mine to carry and the cost of it is mine to carry, and no younger man's name goes anywhere near it. If this lands on anyone, it lands on me. I felt Halloran go very still beside me. I've stood that gate 11 years. I can afford it. They can't, not yet. Mr. Voss spoke then for the first and almost the only time. He had a quiet, dry, unhurried voice, the voice of a man who has read a great many folders. Sergeant Brennick, he said. I've read yours. He let that sit, and I felt the temperature of the room change as the others understood that there was a folder, and that this man had read it, and that they had not. So I'll say only this, and then I'll defer to the captain, because operational command is his and not mine. Whatever you are considering, and I think you are considering something, I think you have been considering it since the cobbles. Remember that the most decorated thing in your file is not anything you did. It's a thing you chose not to do once, when doing it would have been easy and right and would have cost a great deal less than not doing it cost you. He picked his pen back up. You earned the gate by being the man who could and didn't. Don't let a man in a white jacket talk you out of the only victory you've ever been proud of. I have thought about that sentence more times than I can count. He was right, and he was also, by a single degree that none of us could see yet, about to be proven incomplete. Because there is a difference between not doing a thing out of fear of the cost, and not doing it because you have found a third way that the man in the white jacket cannot imagine, and the whole of the next 2 days was me looking for that third way in the dark. We rose. Nothing was decided except the permit refusal and the doubled presents. As we filed out, Halloran caught my sleeve in the corridor, and his closed ledger face was, for once, open about an inch. You said the cost lands on you, he said. I heard you. And I'm telling you the cost of you doing something stupid on that forecourt lands on every man who's ever stood a gate proud. So whatever third way you're looking for in there behind that face, and I know you, Corwin, I can see you looking, you find one that keeps your hands at your sides. You find one that wins without a single blow, or you find none at all and you let it burn. He let go of my sleeve. I mean it. There's no version of you hitting that man that isn't a defeat. Even the version where you win. I know, I said, and I did know. That was exactly the problem and exactly the door, and I would not understand which of those two things it was until Saturday came. The game changed on Friday, the day before, and it changed because of two children, which is the way these things most often turn when they turn at all. I was on the south gate at the 10 o'clock post, the quiet one, before the heat of the day brings the crowd. The forecourt was being readied for Saturday, barriers stacked, our doubled presence drilling their positions, a sense in the air of a building bracing. And out of the wicket on the inner side, where the public never goes and where I had no business expecting anyone but staff, came two children I knew by sight the way every man on the gate knows them. Princess Malin, who is 8, in a green coat with her hair coming loose from its plait, and her brother Prince Joran, who is 10, and had reached the age where he believed he was in charge of his sister, which she permitted with the lofty patience of a younger sibling who knows better. They were not supposed to be at the gate. They had, I would learn, slipped a tutor and a corridor and a very alarmed footman in the way that clever children slip things, because Joran had heard the older staff talking about the man who was going to fight the guards, and Joran at 10 had a 10-year-old's clean and burning sense of justice, and had come down to see for himself whether it was true that the guards were cowards, because somebody at his lessons had said so, and it had lodged in him like a splinter. I should say here, because it matters to everything after, that I am not a man children warm to easily. The bearskin frightens the small ones, and the stillness puzzles the older ones, and I have made my peace with being, to most of the kingdom's children, a kind of large red statue that occasionally and thrillingly blinks. But these two I had stood near, off and on, for years across courtyards, at the edges of ceremonies, the princess once at 4 wandering up to stare at my boots with frank scientific interest until a nanny swept her away. I knew the shape of them the way you know the regular features of a long post. Joran marched straight up to the inner rail, planted his feet, and looked up at me with the king's own jaw set hard, and he said, "Are you the one they're saying is a coward?" I did not answer because I was on post, and a guard on post does not speak, not even to a prince, and Joran knew that and was counting on it, the way Vane had counted on it. And for one cold instant I understood that the boy at the rail and the champion on the cobbles were asking me the exact same question, and that the boy's version was the one that could actually break my heart. "Joran," said Malin, scandalized, tugging his sleeve, "you can't call him that." "I'm not calling him it, I'm asking. There's a difference." But the boy's certainty had wobbled, looking up at my face. "Everyone says the guards won't fight the champion because they're scared. Tomas, the young one, there's a video of him being laughed at and he just stood there. If somebody laughed at me, he stopped. Something in the standing red wall of me had reached him, the way it sometimes reaches the serious ones. Why don't you fight him?" He said, and it was not a taunt now. It was a real question, a child's real and aching question, and underneath it I heard the thing he could not say, which was, "Are the people who are supposed to protect me actually able to?" I will tell you what I wanted to do. I wanted to break every regulation in the book, kneel down to the rail, and tell that boy the truth, that I could put Cassian Vane on the cobbles in under 3 seconds without breaking a sweat or a bone, that the not fighting was not the absence of the ability but the mastery of it, that the bravest men he would ever meet were the ones strong enough to choose to stand still. I wanted to give him that because he needed it, because a kingdom that lets its children believe that strength is the same as violence has already lost something it cannot easily buy back. I said nothing, I held the post. It was the hardest 2 minutes of the entire affair, harder than anything Vane ever did to me, because Vane was only attacking my pride and Joran was unknowingly attacking the one belief I had rebuilt my whole life around, and I could not, would not, defend it by cracking the very discipline that was the proof. What saved the moment was the footman, arriving breathless and apologetic, and Malin, who did a thing I have never forgotten. She let go of her brother's sleeve, and she came right up to the rail, and she looked up at me, not at the bearskin, at me, at my eyes, for a long, grave, 8-year-old moment. And then she said quietly, so only Joran and I and the footman could hear it. "He's not scared. Look at his hands." My hands were at my sides, perfectly still, holding the rifle at the order. Perfectly, terribly still. "Scared people's hands shake," said Princess Malin, with the absolute authority of a child stating a known law of the universe. "Mine do, his don't. He's not scared, he's deciding." And she took her brother's hand, the splinter visibly working its way out of him as he looked from her to me and back, and she led him toward the footman. And at the wicket she turned and looked back at me one more time, and she did the smallest thing, a thing no camera caught and no one but the footman saw. She put one finger to her lips, our secret, that she had seen the steadiness and understood it, and then she was gone through the wicket. "He's deciding." An 8-year-old had walked up to the thing the briefing room full of rank had circled for an hour, and named it in 3 words and walked away. And that was the midpoint. That was where it stopped being about the clip, and the institution, and even the boy's faith, and became about a thing much simpler and much heavier that I now had to carry to Saturday. That the children of the house I had given my second life to were watching, and that they were not watching to see whether the guard could fight. They already half suspected he could. They were watching to learn what a strong man does with his strength when the whole world is screaming at him to use it. Malin had given me the only frame that mattered, and it was not a frame of me cracking. It was a frame of me deciding, in front of everyone, in a way even a child could read. And I did not yet have the faintest idea how to make a decision visible without making it a blow. That was the night I stopped looking for a way to refuse Cassian Vane, and started looking for a way to answer him that would leave both my hands at my sides and still, somehow, be unmistakable to a 10-year-old boy reading the comments at midnight. I did not sleep, which surprised no one who has met me. I sat in the small room they give the senior unmarried men, with the single window I can finally keep at my back, and I did the thing the gray-bearded instructor taught me to do with a problem that has no door. I stopped looking for the door and started looking at the man. What did I actually know about Cassian Vane? Not from the clips, from the cobbles. I had counted him that first hour the way I count everyone, and I made myself go back through the count now, slowly, frame by frame, the way I had not let myself do while he was talking. The walk the most dangerous man in every room stopped checking. The hands held away from the body, ready, unable to stop being ready. The trophies worn into the street. The homework done overnight on my name, the relief, almost the disappointment when he found nothing. The way the warmth had dropped out of his voice by 1 degree the moment the statue starved him of a response. And under all of it, the thing I had seen and not let myself see. That a man does not build a box that elaborate, does not bring a banner printed in advance, does not need this badly to be witnessed, unless somewhere underneath the laurel and the gold thread he is terrified that without the witnesses he is nothing. The most dangerous man in every room who has stopped checking whether it's still true, because he is afraid of the day he checks, and the answer is no. Cassian Vane was not attacking my emptiness. He was running from his own, and he had picked the King's Guard because we were the one opponent guaranteed by our own rules never to land the blow that would expose it. That was the door. It had been the door the whole time. Vane needed a fight because a fight was the only thing that could prove he still existed. The way to defeat him was not to fight and not to refuse. It was to give him, in front of everyone, the one thing his entire performance was built to deny him. A demonstration that the choice not to strike was itself the greater strength. Proved so plainly, so physically, that even he could not narrate it away. I knew, sitting in that room at 3 in the morning, exactly how I would do it. It was a thing from the school in the country with the sand, a thing the instructor had made me practice until I could do it asleep, and it required no blow at all. I should tell you the thing Mr. Voss had meant in the briefing room, because it is the floor that everything else in me stands on, and because I had not let myself look at it directly in a long time, and that night I made myself. The most decorated thing in my file is not a thing I did. It is a thing I chose not to do. There was a night, near the end of those 18 years, in a place I am not permitted to name, where a man we had been hunting for a long and bloody season finally stood in front of me with his hands coming up empty, and his face full of the particular terror of a man who knows the account has come due. Everything I had been and done pointed at the simple end of it. It would have been easy. It would have been, by every reckoning of that place and that war, right? He had earned it 10 times over, and no one anywhere would ever have asked me a single question. The gray-bearded instructor was years dead by then, and his voice was the only thing in my head. A man who must win is already losing. I do not fully understand, even now, what made me lower my hands instead of finishing it. I took him alive. It cost us. It cost me, personally, in ways that put the single window at my back for the rest of my life, and woke a dog in a cellar that took 11 years of standing still to quiet. The man I spared talked. What he said saved a great many people I never met and will never know my name. That is the medal that isn't in the public file. That is the blank cash in vain mistook for emptiness. The hardest thing I ever did, the thing my whole second life is built on, was keep my hands at my sides when bringing them up would have been easy and applauded and wrong. So when I sat in that room at 3 in the morning planning to walk onto open ground and let a frightened champion throw everything he had at me while I kept my hands at my sides, I was not learning a new lesson. I was being asked to pass the same examination I had already passed once, on a far worse night, with far higher stakes, and no audience at all. The forecourt was, in a way, the easy version. This time the man only wanted to hit me, not kill me, and this time the kingdom was watching, and this time the cost of restraint was a bruised pride instead of a decade of bad sleep. If I had held my hands once when holding them tore something in me that never fully healed, I could surely hold them again for a champion's tantrum. That was the thing I told myself in the dark, and it was true, and it was the reason that for 1 hour the answer felt clean. And for about an hour in the dark, it felt like a clean answer, the third way Halloran had demanded, the deciding Malin had named, and I let myself briefly believe. That was the false dawn, and it ended at 6:30 in the morning with a knock in Halloran's face. "It's worse," he said before I had the door fully open. He had a tablet in his hand and the closed ledger had been thrown open by something. Vane's people released a statement at 6. They've changed the terms. He's not challenging the guards anymore. He turned the tablet to me. He's challenging you, by name, Sergeant Corwin Brennick, South Gate. He's saying the regiment is hiding behind its rules to protect one frightened old man, and that he'll be on the forecourt at noon, and if Brennick doesn't come out from behind the wall and face him like the soldier he pretends to have been, then the King's Guard can stop pretending it's anything but theater. He let me read it. There's more. He's got the children's appearance. Yesterday, at the rail. Someone leaked it, one of the staff, the footman, we don't know yet. There's a still of the young prince at the inner rail looking up at you. The caption says, "Even the royal children came to ask why their guards won't defend them." The cold that went through me then was not for myself. I had been cold for myself for 3 days and grown used to it. This was a different cold, the old operational cold, the one that means the situation has stopped being about pride and started being about people who cannot protect themselves. They had put a child's face on it. They had taken the gravest, gentlest moment of the whole affair, a 10-year-old boy's honest aching question and an 8-year-old girl's astonishing wisdom, and flattened it into ammunition, a still frame with a lie under it, aimed at me. "He doesn't know what he's done," I said quietly. "He knows exactly what he's done. That's what makes him dangerous." "No." I looked at the still of Joran's upturned face, that set jaw, that splinter of doubt, and I felt the thing in the cellar of me that I had spent 11 years keeping on its chain rise up calm and enormous and entirely, lethally clear, and for the first time in 11 years I did not reach to pull it back, because for the first time in 11 years it was not anger. He's used a child to call me a coward. That part he meant. But he's also told me in writing in front of the whole kingdom that he'll come out onto open ground at a known time and stand still in front of me and dare me to act. I handed the tablet back. He thinks that's the trap. He spent 3 days building a box with no exit, and he's just stepped into it himself and locked the door behind him, and the poor, proud, terrified fool genuinely cannot see it. Get me Captain Drummond, and Mr. Voss, if he's still in the building. I know how to end this, and I can do it without lifting a hand, and I need exactly 4 things from the regiment, and one of them you are going to hate." Halloran looked at me for a long moment, the open ledger reading the thing in my face. "Your hands stay at your sides," he said. It was not a question, it was the price. "My hands stay at my sides," I said. "I swear it on the gate, not one blow. He's going to do something worse to himself than I ever could, and the entire trick is going to be standing close enough to let him, and not 1 inch closer." The 4 things I asked of the regiment were these. First, that I be permitted to step out from behind the wall at noon, onto the public forecourt in uniform on my own authority, with the cost falling on me and no younger man's name near it, and that Captain Drummond granted in writing, so that whatever happened, the order had been lawful and the discipline unbroken. Second, that not one other guard engage, no matter what, that they hold their posts and their stillness as if it were the most ordinary morning of their lives, because the contrast would be the whole of the argument. Third, that Mr. Voss's office quietly confirmed to the press office, in advance, a single fact about my file, 1 fact, declassified for this one purpose, to be released only if and after it became necessary, and not before. And fourth, the one Halloran hated, the one that made even the careful Captain Drummond set down his pen, that the regiment stand back and let it happen. No barriers between us, no intervention. That they trust the man they had let stand the gate for 11 years to know the difference between a fight and the absence of one, and to walk to the very edge of that difference in front of the entire kingdom without crossing it. Drummond was a long time answering. He looked at Voss, and Voss looked at the table, and finally the captain said, "If your hands leave your sides, Sergeant, I will have you in irons before he hits the cobbles, and I will mean it, and you will deserve it." "I'd expect nothing less, sir. That's the point. If my hands leave my sides, I've lost, and so has the gate, and I'd want to be in irons. The whole demonstration is that they won't." There was one more thing, and it did not come through any of the men at the table. It came down the quiet way, the household way, the way the most important things in a palace always travel. An hour before noon, as I stood in the muster room having my tunic checked over twice by a color sergeant who had abruptly become very particular about a brush of lint, a member of the Queen's own staff came in, not to give an order. The staff were always careful never to give a guard an order that wasn't the guard's to take, but to deliver a message plainly, and then withdraw. Queen Saralyn, the staffer said, was aware of the matter. The Queen wished the regiment to know that she had every confidence in the discipline of her guard, that no man under her roof would ever be asked to trade his honor for a crowd's approval, and that whatever happened on the forecourt, the guard who held his post held it with her trust. And then, the staffer added lower, off the script, as people do when they have decided to give you the real message under the official one. Her Majesty had asked particularly that the children not be at any window. They had been told to stay at their lessons. "But you know children, Sergeant," the staffer said, with the ghost of a smile, and withdrew. I knew children, they would find a window. And the Queen, who was a wiser woman than the kingdom always remembered to notice, surely knew it too, and had said it anyway, the way you say a thing to put it on the record of your love rather than in any real hope of obedience. So I went out to the forecourt carrying that as well, not just the cameras and the institution and the lie that wore the truth's coat, but the plain fact that the good woman I had given my second life to had sent word that my honor was safe with her whether I won the crowd or not, which is the only kind of trust worth standing a gate for, and the surest way I know to make a man absolutely determined not to spend it cheaply. Voss signed the declassification authority. Drummond signed the order. Halloran signed nothing, because there was nothing for him to sign, but he walked the corridor with me to the muster point at 11:45, and he said only one thing on the way, and it was not about Vane. "The boy's going to be watching," he said. "Both of them. They've been kept in, but they'll find a window. Children always find a window, and they'll be watching their guard walk out onto open ground to face the man who called him a coward. Whatever you do out there, Corwin, you're doing it in front of those two as much as in front of the cameras." He stopped at the door to the forecourt. "Malin said you were deciding, so decide right." Noon on the south forecourt of Harrowgate Palace. I have stood in front of crowds my whole adult life, but I had never walked out into one as myself, alone, with my name on a banner and a kingdom's worth of phones turning toward the sound of the wicket opening. The forecourt was packed to the barriers and beyond, thousands, easily, the ordinary and the hungry all mixed together, and a forest of raised phones, and somewhere up in the palace, behind a window, 2 children. The doubled guard stood their posts around the edges, immaculate, motionless, exactly as I had asked, a wall of red discipline that did not so much as turn its eyes to the spectacle, and the sight of them held me steady as I came through the wicket. Cassian Vane was in the center of the forecourt, where the cobbles open into the wide paved circle around the old fountain, stripped down now to a black training vest that showed the engine of him, every hour of those 10,000 hours written in the muscle, his 4 students fanned behind him and the banner held high. He had a microphone, of course he had a microphone, and he had been working the crowd for 10 minutes, and when the wicket opened and I came out, alone, in full uniform, the red tunic and the bearskin and the white gloves, on my own 2 feet onto open ground, the noise that went up was a thing I felt in my chest like the concussion of an old, remembered sound. The disappointment hit his face first, before the triumph. I caught it because I catch everything. For 3 days he had been certain I would never come out, that the empty chair was the best clip of all, and the empty chair would have let him stay the most dangerous man in the room forever, unchallenged, his terror safely unexamined. My walking out was the one thing he had told the world he wanted, and the one thing underneath he had been praying would not happen. Then the showman swallowed the fear, the way he always had, and the grin came on like a stage light. "He came," Vane roared into the microphone, and the crowd roared back. "The furniture has legs after all. Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Corwin Brennick, the frightened old man himself, has decided to be brave." He prowled toward me, microphone in hand, his students drifting wide. "Well, friend, you're here. So let's find out what's under the fur. Padded, gloved, refereed, like I said, I'm a man of my word, or—" And he tossed the microphone underhand to the shaved-headed student and rolled his shoulders, the hands coming up away from the body, ready, unable to stop being ready. "Or we can just find out the honest way, right here, right now, and let these good people see whether the king's guard can do anything but stand still." I stopped at a precise distance from him, not the regulation distance of the gate. A different distance, an old distance, the one the gray-bearded instructor had burned into me, the exact range at which a man like Vane believes he is in control, and is, in fact, already inside another man's reach without knowing it. I let my hands hang at my sides, open, white-gloved, perfectly still. And I looked at him, for the first time in 3 days, I looked Cassian Vane full in the face, and let him see that there was someone home behind the bearskin after all. He felt it. I watched it reach him. Something in the set of me, something he had 10,000 hours of training to read and no way to explain, told the animal part of him, the part that keeps champions alive, that the distance was wrong, that the stillness in front of him was not the stillness of furniture, that he had walked up to something he had badly misfiled. His grin flickered. For one frame, one single frame that every camera caught and none of them understood until later, the most dangerous man in every room checked at last whether it was still true. And then, because he was who he was, because the fear of the answer was worse than any risk, Cassian Vane did the thing I had walked onto open ground to let him do. He threw the first strike. It was a good strike. I want to be fair to the man because he was genuinely, dangerously skilled, and the thing I did would mean nothing if I pretended otherwise. It was a lead hand feint to draw my guard high followed by a real strike, the back fist, fast and heavy, and aimed precisely at the line of my jaw. A strike that had, by his own account, broken noses on 3 continents. A strike designed to be the only frame anyone remembered. A strike to fold the furniture in half in front of the whole kingdom. It never landed, and I never hit him, and those 2 facts are the entire reason I am telling you this story instead of sitting in irons. Here is what the gray-bearded instructor spent 4 years teaching a furious boy, and what I had spent 11 years at a gate keeping sharp under a stillness everyone mistook for sleep. A strike is a gift of force. The man who throws it is handing you all of his weight, all of his momentum, all of his commitment in a straight line, and a man who needs to win, who has thrown everything into the blow because the blow is the only thing that can prove he exists, hands you more of it than anyone. You do not meet that force. Meeting force with force is what frightened men do, and what Vane expected, and what would have turned the forecourt into exactly the brawl that would have proven his every word. You do not meet it. You move it. I shifted my weight off the line, a half step no more, the kind of movement a man makes to let someone pass in a doorway, and I brought one white-gloved hand up, not to block, not to strike, but to touch. Just to touch. The flat of my palm met the inside of his driving forearm with no more violence than a man laying his hand on a gate, and I did the only thing I did in the whole of that confrontation. I lent his own force a destination. I guided the strike that was meant for my jaw 3 inches past it, into the empty air where my head had been, and I let the weight he had committed to breaking my face carry him exactly where he had aimed it, forward, fast, and now unopposed, into nothing. Cash in Vane, 3-time Open champion, full contact, no points, no padding, stumbled past me into the empty center of the forecourt and had to catch himself on the rim of the old fountain to keep from going down. The crowd made a sound I have never heard a crowd make before or since, not a cheer, not a laugh. A kind of indrawn breath, thousands of it, the sound of a great many people watching a thing they had been promised would go one way, go entirely another, and not yet understanding how. The phones did not lower. They had their frame. It just was not the frame they had been told to expect. He came again. Of course he came again. I had known he would. I had counted on it, because a man whose whole self rests on the blow cannot accept that the blow has been refused. He can only conclude he threw it wrong. He came faster, angrier, the showmanship burning off him now, the real fighter underneath stripped bare and furious and frightened. A combination this time, strikes I will not bore you by naming, a flurry meant to overwhelm by sheer rate, the thing that had finished 100 opponents who tried to stand and trade. I did not stand and trade. I was not there to trade. Every strike he threw, I moved a slip, a step, a redirection, a palm laid against a wrist to send a kick wide, the distance opening and closing under my feet in a pattern he could not read because it was not a fighting pattern. It was a pattern for not fighting, and there is no defense against it because it offers nothing to defend against. He was throwing everything at a man who simply, calmly, repeatedly, was not where the strike arrived, and who never once closed a fist. And the whole time, my hand stayed at my sides between the touches. White gloves, open. I want that on the record because Captain Drummond was 20 feet away with 2 men ready to put me in irons, and at the end of it he reported in writing what the cameras confirmed from 40 angles. Sergeant Brennick did not at any point strike, grasp, throw, or restrain the challenger. He moved. He touched twice to redirect. He never once attacked. The most violent thing I did to Cash in Vane in front of the entire kingdom was decline, again and again and again, to hurt him, while making it impossible for him to hurt me. That is the thing the briefing room couldn't find and the boy couldn't see, and the 8-year-old had named in 3 words. Deciding, made visible. Strength, proved by its restraint so plainly that even the cameras understood. It took perhaps 90 seconds. To Vane it must have felt like 90 years. Because a fighter learns who he is by the answer his strikes get: pain answers, a block answers, a counter answers, even a miss against a moving target answers, and I gave his strikes no answer at all. I gave them nothing to be. I unmade his entire self, 90 seconds at a time, without leaving a single mark on him, in front of the people he had summoned to witness his triumph. And at the end of it, Cassian Vane stood in the center of the forecourt, chest heaving, soaked, his combination spent against empty air, his 4 students gone silent and pale behind him. And he looked at me, a man not even breathing hard, hands at his sides, bearskin straight, having absorbed everything the realm's 3-time champion could throw, and answered it with nothing but a refusal. And the thing he had spent his whole life running from finally caught him in front of 10,000 phones. He understood. I watched the understanding arrive. It is a terrible thing to watch a man learn the truth about himself with no warning and no mercy and no privacy, and I took no pleasure in it, whatever the seller in me had wanted 3 days before. He understood that he had thrown everything he was at me, and I had not needed to throw anything back. That the stillness he had called furniture was a discipline so far past his own that it could disarm him without a fist. That the blank in my file was not the absence of a fighter, but the silence of one who had nothing left to prove. And last and worst, that every person watching had just seen it too. He stood swaying by the fountain, and the microphone lay on the cobbles where his student had dropped it. And into the enormous waiting silence Cassian Vane did the only thing left to a man who has run out of rooms that don't know. He bent slowly and put his hands on his knees and lowered his head, not a bow, nothing so dignified, just a man trying to find the bottom of himself and discovering there is one. And the realm's 3-time open champion, full contact, no points, no padding, said into the cobblestones, in a voice the nearest phones just caught. "And what are you?" I could have let the silence answer it. The silence would have been enough. The cameras had everything they needed, and the man was already unmade. But there was a boy at a window who had asked me almost the same question 2 days before with the same ache underneath it. And there was an 8-year-old who had told a kingdom I was deciding. And there was a generation of young guards reading the comments at midnight learning the wrong lesson about the leash and the strength. And to all of them, I owed an answer that the silence could not give. So I broke, for the first and only time, the stillness of the post, not with a blow, but with the only words I spoke on that forecourt. I bent and I picked up the microphone from the cobbles, and I straightened, and I did not raise my voice, because the man who must be loud is already losing. "I'm a guard," I said. It carried. The forecourt was so silent it carried to the barriers. I let it sit, and then I said the rest of it to Vane, but for the boy at the window. "You asked what's under the fur. I'll tell you because you've earned the truth and the realm should hear it once. Before this gate, I served 18 years in places this kingdom does not put on maps, under a flag I'm not permitted to name even now. I was trained by a better man than either of us, by an instructor who taught me one thing above every other, that anyone can learn to strike, and it takes a year, and that learning not to strike when every part of you is screaming to, that takes a life. I could have ended you in the first 3 seconds. You know that now. Your own body knew it before your pride did. I didn't, not because I was forbidden. Because choosing not to is the only strength worth having, and it is the strength this uniform stands for, and you spent 3 days telling a kingdom of children that it was cowardice." I looked at him, not unkindly, because there was nothing left in him to be unkind to. It isn't cowardice. It's the hardest thing a strong man ever does. And every guard standing this wall does it every single day, in the cold and the rain, with no cameras, for people who will never know their names. That's what's under the fur, Mr. Vane. Men who could and don't. There is nothing braver in this kingdom, and you owe them an apology more than you owe me one. That was the fact Mr. Voss had declassified. One fact, 18 years of service in places without names, released the instant it became necessary and not one moment before, confirmed by the press office within the hour with the regiment's seal on it, so that no one could call it a guard's boast. The blank in my file had a shape after all, and the kingdom learned its size that afternoon. Cassian Vane straightened. To his lasting credit, and I will give him this, because a man who learns the truth about himself and does not run from it has begun, however late, to become someone. He did not bluster, and he did not slink, and he did not reach for the showman one more time. He looked at the microphone in my hand, and at the wall of motionless red guards around the forecourt who had not so much as turned their eyes to him through the whole of it, and he understood, I think, that those silent men had been the real answer to his challenge all along, and that I had only been the one permitted to say it aloud. And he held out his hand. I shook it. The cameras caught that too. His grip was not the grip of a man trying to win something. It was just a handshake, the first honest thing he had done on that forecourt. "I came here to humiliate a coward," he said, and he said it loudly on purpose, for the phones, the last performance of his old life put to the service of his new one. "There's no coward here. I was the only frightened man on this ground today, and I dressed it up in a black belt and a banner and pointed it at the bravest men in the kingdom. Sergeant, forgive me. And the rest of you," he turned to the wall of guards and to the cameras, and his voice cracked and he let it, "I'm sorry. I had it exactly backwards. I'm sorry." He took down the banner himself. His 4 students helped him, silent, changed. The Iron Laurel issued a statement that evening that was, for once, not a stunt. It has become, in the years since, a rather good gymnasium, and Cassian Vane teaches the first lesson there himself, and I am told the first lesson is no longer how to strike. I gave the microphone back to the shaved-headed student, and I turned, and I marched back across the forecourt through a silence that broke, behind me, into a sound I had not earned in 11 years of standing still, and will carry to the end of my days. Not a cheer for a winner, because there had been no fight to win, but a deep rolling roar of a kind of relief, the sound of a kingdom getting back a thing it had been frightened it had lost. The wall of red guards stood their posts and did not move and did not cheer, because they were on duty, and that, too, was the answer. I went in through the wicket. Halloran was just inside it, and the closed ledger was wide open, and he did not say anything because there was nothing to say, and he put his hand on my shoulder, which in 9 years he had never once done. I went back on the south gate the following morning at the 10 o'clock post, because that is where the roster put me, and I do not ask the roster to protect me. The clips, this time, did the opposite of what they had done before. That is the only justice the format ever offers, that it can turn as fast the other way. But I did not watch them. I stood my post in the cold morning with the chin strap in its familiar groove and the ache waking in the arch of my left foot at the 90-minute mark, and I counted the crowd, which was large and quiet and respectful in a way I had not seen before, the phones lowered now, the people simply looking, the way you look at a thing you have newly understood. And at 10:30, through the inner wicket where the public never goes, came a green coat and a boy with the king's jaw, escorted this time, permitted this time, walking with the careful importance of children on an official errand. Joran came to the inner rail and stood very straight and looked up at me, and the splinter was gone from him entirely, replaced by something steadier that I hope he keeps his whole life. "I watched," he said, "from the window. Malin was right, you were deciding." He squared his small shoulders. "I understand now. Thank you for not fighting him. And then, because he was 10 and because some things a boy has to know, could you really have ended him in 3 seconds? I was on post. I said nothing. But I looked at him and I let him see the answer, the way Malin had taught me a guard could, and the boy grinned, a real grin, a free one, nothing of Vane's old stage light in it, and nodded as if a great matter had been settled, which it had. Malin did not come to the rail. She stood a little back by the wicket in her green coat with her hair coming loose, and she watched her brother and watched me, grave and certain. And when Joran turned to go, she caught my eye for one last grown-up moment across the cobbles, and she did the small thing again, the thing no camera ever caught and no one but the two of us ever knew. She raised one finger to her lips. Our secret. That she had seen the steadiness before anyone and named the deciding and been right. I did not move. A guard on post does not move. But the dog in the cellar of me, which had stood up all the way 3 days before, lay back down, not chained, not starved, simply at peace, and I have not heard it since. I stand the south gate still. I am 51 years old, and I have given 2 lives to the same kingdom, and I have learned the lesson the gray-bearded instructor swore was the only one that mattered, learned it now all the way down to the arch of my aching foot, that the strongest thing a man who knows how to hurt people can do is decide, in front of everyone, again and again, for as long as he is given to stand, not to. That is what is under the fur. It always was.